What happens when you're blessed, but your past still haunts you? How do you move forward when you know you must face the one thing you've been avoiding your whole life? I'm talking about that one unresolved part of your life that you've kept tucked away. That relationship, that failure, that fear, the part of your past you're scared to confront. In Genesis 32, verse 7, we find Jacob, blessed beyond measure but haunted by his past, his twin brother Esau. Jacob had lived for years, knowing that one day he would have to face the consequences of his actions. His heart was heavy with fear because the last time he saw Esau, things didn't end well. Jacob was afraid of what that confrontation might bring. Does that sound familiar? We can be so blessed and yet so bound by the fear of something from our past. But here's the truth. The blessing of God doesn't erase your past. It equips you to confront it. God didn't bless Jacob to run from his past, but to face it head on. And He's doing the same for you. Now, before we get into Jacob's anxiety, let's rewind and set the stage. Jacob and Esau were twins but opposites in every way. Esau was the firstborn, the hunter, the strong outdoorsman, the one everyone assumed would carry the family legacy. Jacob, on the other hand, stayed closer to home, more quiet, more thoughtful. But there was something Jacob wanted that wasn't his: the birthright, the blessing. In those days, that birthright blessing was everything. It wasn't just about wealth, it was about legacy, about God's favor over your entire life. And Jacob knew it. So one day when Esau came home exhausted and starving, Jacob saw his moment. He took advantage of Esau's weakness and convinced him to trade his birthright for a bowl of stew. Think about that for a second. Jacob traded something sacred for something temporary. But it didn't stop there. Later, when his father was going blind, Jacob disguised himself as Esau, tricking his father into giving him the final blessing meant for his brother, the firstborn. When Esau found out, oh, he was livid. "I'm going to kill him." Those were Esau's words, and Jacob knew he had to run. He ran, not just from his brother, but from his past, from his guilt. For years he built a life away from the mess he created, but you can't outrun your past forever. Now fast forward to years later. Jacob has been blessed by God. He's wealthy, has a family, and is on his way back to his homeland. But there's one problem: Esau, the brother he betrayed. And now Jacob hears that Esau is coming to meet him with 400 men. Can you imagine the fear? Can you see why Jacob was so anxious? And this brings us to Genesis 32:7, where Jacob, in great fear and distress, starts frantically preparing for what he believes will be a deadly confrontation. You see, up until this point, Jacob is in full panic mode. He divides his camp, sends gifts ahead to appease Esau, and starts crafting escape plans, trying to manipulate the situation, because that's what Jacob has always done: control. But underneath all of this, Jacob is dealing with something much deeper. He's facing the fear of his past. And the more Jacob tries to control, the more his fear controls him. How many of us are living like Jacob, blessed but still running scared? God's given you promises, but you can't even enjoy them because the fear of your past keeps whispering in your ear. What if it all comes crashing down? What if I lose control? What if Esau still wants revenge? It's time to stop running. It's time to stop letting fear call the shots. God didn't bless you to live in fear of what's behind you. He blessed you to face it, to conquer it. And the turning point for Jacob is that in Genesis 32:9, he prayed. It's almost as if Jacob hits a wall and realizes, I can't fix this. I can't control this. I can't outsmart my way out of this situation. So he does something he hasn't done yet. He turns to God. The Bible says, then Jacob prayed. It's like, finally. He's been scheming, stressing, and now at last he stops and talks to God. And Jacob's prayer isn't one of pride or arrogance. It's a humble, desperate plea. O God of my father Abraham, save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau. Jacob knows he's in over his head. He's terrified of what's coming, but he's holding on to God's promises. And that's what we need to do when we face our own fears, isn't it? It's easy to pray when everything's going well. But when you're staring down the barrel of your past, when the consequences of your mistakes feel like they're about to crash down on you, that's when prayer becomes real. It's not about fancy words or trying to impress God. It's about laying it all on the table like Jacob did and saying, God, I need you. I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know what you've promised. Sometimes we spend so much time trying to figure out how to fix things that we forget the most powerful thing we can do is pray. When Jacob stopped thinking about the attack and started speaking to God, something shifted. The battle didn't start with Esau. It started with Jacob's own mind. Let me ask you, what battles are you trying to fight on your own? What fears are you trying to control, thinking if you just plan enough, it'll all work out? You don't need another strategy. You need prayer. Because it's in prayer that fear begins to lose its grip and faith starts to rise. Jacob's prayer wasn't just a cry for help. It was a declaration of trust in the God who had brought him this far and wasn't about to let him fall. Now Jacob knew he was blessed, but there was always something nagging at him. You see, he had spent his whole life chasing after things, grabbing for whatever he could, even if it meant doing it in a questionable way. That's who Jacob was. Ambitious, determined, always reaching for more. In fact, the very first thing Jacob did was try to get ahead. When he was born, Esau came out first, but Jacob came out grabbing the heel of his brother as if to say, "No, I want to be first." They saw him grabbing that heel, and they named him Jacob, which literally means heel grabber. Every time Jacob said his name, it was a reminder of how he had lived his life. Grabbing, taking, trying to get ahead. And it worked. Jacob got the birthright. He got the blessing from his father Isaac. But deep down, he knew how he had gotten it. Through trickery. The blessing was meant for Esau, but Jacob, with the help of his mother, deceived his father. So here's the weight Jacob had been carrying all these years. Yes, he was blessed, but was he really blessed for who he truly was? Or was he just blessed because he tricked someone into it? He was still Jacob, the heel grabber. He might have all this wealth and success, but he didn't have peace. He hadn't been blessed as himself. And that's where the wrestling comes in. In Genesis 32:24, Jacob is alone and he starts wrestling with a man who we come to realize is God. This isn't just a physical struggle, it's symbolic. Jacob is wrestling with God, but really, he's wrestling with who he's been his entire life. He's wrestling with his past, with his identity as Jacob, the one who grabs the heel, the one who deceives. But here's the turning point. In that struggle, God asks Jacob a question that changes everything. What is your name? Now, that might seem like a simple question, but it's deeper than that. God is making Jacob confront who he really is. Jacob has to say it. My name is Jacob. He has to admit, I'm the one who's been grabbing, deceiving, manipulating. And then God does something incredible. He says, "Your name will no longer be Jacob but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." In that moment, God gives Jacob a new name, a new identity. He's no longer living under the shadow of what he did to get ahead. He can move forward with the certainty that God's blessing is truly his, not because of something he took, but because of who God made him to be. The past is wiped away. Now let's fast forward to the moment Jacob finally meets Esau. This is it. The moment Jacob has been dreading for years. But something incredible happens in Genesis 33:4. Instead of the violent confrontation Jacob feared, the Bible says, Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Think about that for a second. Jacob had spent so much time terrified of what would happen when he faced Esau. He had built up this story in his mind that Esau was coming for revenge, that this was the end. But the thing Jacob feared the most turned out to be the thing God had already worked out. How many times do we do the same thing? We let the fear of what might happen keep us trapped. We imagine the worst-case scenario, and it paralyzes us. But sometimes, the thing you fear the most is the very thing God has already gone ahead and taken care of. You may feel like your past is too big to overcome, but let me tell you, your God is bigger. The grace of God is more powerful than the mistakes of your past. The love of God is stronger than the fear that has been holding you back. It's time to stop running. It's time to trust that God has already prepared the way. When Jacob stopped running from Esau and faced his past, he found something he didn't expect: reconciliation, healing, and peace. And that same peace is available to you today. The God who changed Jacob's name and gave him a new identity is the same God who can rewrite your story. Thank you for watching. Stay strong, and God bless you.